We are continuing with Chapter 6, Attitude, Influence, in the Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. This is video number 3. Other findings were as follows. Women are normally found to be more yielding to authority than men, but also more anti-aggression. Yet in experiments where women acted as teachers, they too went on administering shocks just as much as the men. The only difference was that they seemed to suffer more conflict. In some experiments, the teacher could hear the learner arrange a kind of contract with the experimenter. "You'll stop if I ask you to, right?" The experimenter would grunt in what sounded like agreement, yet when the learner begged later to be released, few subjects raised the contract as a reason for stopping the test. The authority of an individual has to be clearly perceived before the obedience factor comes into play. In experiments where the learner insisted that the experimenter do a trial run as learner first, and the experimenter then went through the usual learner's performance of begging to be released, the teachers stopped the experiment despite the learner's insistence that they carry on. The learner did not have the authority of the experimenter. Therefore, his commands did not count. Sometimes Milgram used two experimenters of equal status, one of whom wanted to stop the experiment midway, the other affecting to want to carry on. On such occasions, the teacher tended to stop because there was no clear authority structure for him to comply with. Though some teachers did try to establish which of the two experimenters had the higher authority. When they failed, they stopped giving the shocks. However, if when there were two equal status experimenters involved, one offered to be the learner, his requests to be released were ignored. He had effectively relinquished his authority as far as the teachers were concerned. The other experimenter was seen as clearly in charge now, and if he said carry on, the teacher carried on. One final variation is worthy of mention. On some occasions, Milgram set up the experiment so that 3 teachers were involved in the word testing at once, 2 of them being his confederates. First, one confederate objected and backed out of the experiment. Then the second followed. The real subject was ordered to continue his and their work. In 36 out of 40 cases, he would refuse to obey. In this situation, he was conforming rather than obeying. He needed to act in accordance with his peers. Milgram believes that the ability of the ordinary peace-loving, normally kind individual to obey commands, to be cruel, owes much to the fact that the need to be obedient is inculcated in people throughout their lives. Because parental control is part and parcel of youth from a very young age, the genesis of our moral ideas is inseparable from the inculcation of obedient attitudes. To do well in school and then fit into an organization, obedience is required. Obedience brings rewards such as good records, privileges, promotion. We so much come to expect that someone will always be in charge that the authority figure, whoever he is, does not need to exert that authority, just identify it. Loyalty, duty, and discipline, says Milgram, are terms that are saturated with moral meaning. The possession of such traits indicates nothing of the intrinsic goodness of an individual, but the adequacy with which a subordinate performs his social role. Having to turn against an authority figure means disruption of a well-established social structure and consequently creates embarrassment that most people cannot handle. Many find obedience the less painful alternative, Milgram said. Although aggressive tendencies are part and parcel of human nature, they have hardly anything to do with the behavior observed in the experiment. Nor do they have much to do with the destructive obedience of soldiers in war or enveloping a Vietnamese village in searing napalm. The typical soldier kills because he is told to kill, and he regards it as his duty to obey orders. The act of shocking the victim does not stem from destructive urges, but from the fact that subjects have become integrated into a social structure and are unable to get out of it. That, to Milgram, is the more frightening. Aggression is easier to explain, easier to take steps to control, but the power of social structure to undermine valued moral codes is itself controlling. The result, as with Milgram's trembling, sweating subjects is conflict, but the need to obey seems to win. He comments wryly, "We are not perfectly tailored for complete autonomy, nor for total submission." Milgram's obedience experiment cannot be dismissed on the grounds that it was just one set of experiments after all. When the work was replicated in other countries such as South Africa, Australia, and Germany, the obedience factor was found to be even higher. A full 85% of subjects complied with the experimenters. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo believes that the obedience factor was higher still in Milgram's experiment than superficially indicated. He wrote in a letter to the American Psychologist, "The question to ask of Milgram's research is not only why did the majority of normal average subjects behave in evil, felonious ways, but what did the disobeying minority do after they refused to continue to shock the poor soul who was so obviously in pain? Did they intervene, go to his aid, denounce the researcher, protest to higher authorities, etc.? No, even their disobedience was within the framework of acceptability. They stayed in their seats, in their assigned place, politely, psychologically demurred, and they waited to be dismissed by the authority. Using other measures of obedience, in addition to going all the way on the shock generator, obedience to authority in Milgram's research was total." Some commentators have objected to Milgram's generalization from his findings to the nature of war atrocities, saying that he is taking his conclusions too far. But is he? Sociologist Hannah Arendt, who covered Adolf Eichmann's trial, made the telling statement, "The sad and very uncomfortable truth of the matter was that it was not his fanaticism but his very conscience that prompted him to adopt his uncompromising attitude. Eichmann had said himself that he would have sent his own father to the gas chamber if ordered to." From Are We All Nazis? Milgram's experiment caused a furor, not least because he was heavily criticized for exposing the poor subjects to such stress and suffering themselves, but the ethics of experimenters was not at issue here. Another more low-key experiment carried out by American sociologists Sorokin and Boldyrev shows the power that an authority figure can unwittingly wield in shaping others' opinions. A piece of music, Brahms' First Symphony, was played twice to a group of over 2,000 school and college students, but the musicians were not identified. Although exactly the same gramophone record was in fact played twice, an expert introduced the first by saying that the rendering was far superior in beauty and feeling and technical excellence than the version they would hear next. The second was described in an introduction as an exaggerated imitation of a well-known masterpiece. Only 4% of the listeners did not accept that they had heard two different pieces of music. Of the 96% who didn't argue, nearly 60% found the first piece superior to the second, 21% didn't know, and 16% disagreed. A very low percentage, therefore, presumed to question the authority of the expert or to disagree with his learned opinion. And I'll stop it right there, and we will pick up with Chapter 6 in the next video. The next video will be number 4. This is Manipulated Mind with Denise Wynn. See you there.